Hello, everybody. Welcome to Writers Underworld. Today is day one of lessons. This is the reason I created the channel, was to do lessons and writing lessons. We've kind of been postponing to see what happens, but nothing is happening, so let's just do it. So, lesson one: how to be a writer is words. Seems obvious, right? You gotta really be obsessed with words. I think that would be my message to any aspiring writer, is that words are it's the substance of everything you're going to be doing. Is words. They're the alpha and the omega. A crying child in the background. But anyways, you got to be obsessed with words. And what do I mean by this is, well, I'll tell you an anecdote. Anecdotally, when I began writing, I could not write anything. I couldn't really make sentences. My brain was so rudimentary that I didn't know, subject, predicate stuff. Maybe I still don't. But I do know that you got to be obsessed with words. When I had nothing going on. I was like, I'm going to be a writer. And then I was like, well, now I need to know how to write. And how did I go from not knowing how to put, 5 words together to create a sentence and 5 sentences together to create a paragraph, to now I have created all of my babies over here? How did one thing become the other? No. The baby is over there, the real baby. It began with words, and then the trick to it was poetry. I wanted to be, I don't know what kind of writer I wanted to be when I began. Just generalized writer was what I was thinking. But then it became, obvious that I like reading fiction, and I became a writer of fiction. But it began with poetry. I think poetry makes sense, probably more sense when you're young. But even me now in my advanced age, I'm like fantasizing about returning to a time of, just chilling out in the wilderness and creating poetry. Would be righteous. But that's like, I don't even think I ever really got good at poetry. But by the time I did get good at poetry, I was also to a point with my novels where I abandoned poetry and began with the novels. But the point of the poetry is to teach you how to use the words, because words, they're full of surprises and full of potential. And there's things that you can do with words that you cannot even imagine until you start really getting involved with them in a deep and meaningful way. You have to have a connection to words. And some writers I've observed have an innate connection to words and a natural way of utilizing them that is very impressive, in my opinion. And these people seem to be more specialized in formal writing. It's like they had a formal education in, the English language or whatever language, I guess. And that's very impressive to me. And those people, you'll find this in certain books that you'll be reading, is that these people can do amazing things with their formal education of words. But on the other end of things is this goes with music too. If you think about it, there's a lot of parallels between writing and other art forms. But for instance, music is, I used to play guitar with the drummer, and the drummer would be like, you got to count everything, count, count. And he's like, you gotta map it out. Everything is written down first, and then you learn the song and you play it. And I was like, don't you ever just feel the music? And he's like, what do you mean? I was like, you just feel. And then he's like, it's like, I never thought about it that way. It's like, how did you miss that? But yeah, it's kind of the same things with words. You can map it out and chart it out, very diligent, or you just, feel it and let it go. But the thing that I'm trying to convey here is it needs to be an obsession, because words are such a grandiose endeavor that it's like it's like you're trying to chart out the whole universe or the whole galaxy or the whole solar system or the whole natural environment or the whole microscopic environment. You're trying to absorb the entirety of words, and you have to go out there and explore the words, and you have to look at all the words from the position of one word to the other word, and then from that position the perspective over to those other words, and how are they all playing off of each other. And because they all go from A to Z and Z to A, and everything in between. There's little ones and there's big ones, and the little ones can bounce off the big ones, and the big ones can can give life to the smaller ones, and all kinds of things can happen with words. And it's only by your obsession with the words that you can come to realize their fullest potential. And this is going to be a little bit different for everybody. That's why I'm trying to convey my methodology, which I think is solid, if not completely ethereal. But it's going to be different for everybody, because I'll find people, like, I think my vocabulary is adequate for my purposes, but then we're getting down to my nature of kind of being lazy in a way. I don't like to put too much effort into things. When it comes naturally, I'll go with it, but when it becomes difficult, then I'm like, nah, dude, I don't really feel like that. And one example of that is I should be building my vocabulary all the time, but I'm like, my vocabulary is adequate. But then what happens is I go out into the world and I see random people, just going about their lives, and they have these incredible vocabularies, and I'm like, dude, what am I doing wrong here? And what I'm doing wrong is I'm not putting enough effort into expanding my vocabulary, which, but like I've said, mine has always been adequate. But it's never a bad thing to increase your vocabulary. So that does tie into this lesson of words. But it's not just, which words it's also how they sound, which is the poetry aspect of it. And this is going to tie into lesson 3. And when I get to lesson 3, I'm going to come back to this and be like, these things, you got to make them sound good. That's the benefit of poetics, is that you learn how to make the words sound good with the other words. And and it's just obvious things, rhyming and alliteration and cadence, and but you want to have a feel for that, and you don't want to leave that behind, because some people, they're gonna be like, they're gonna put their nose up and like, I don't want to be doing poetics in my serious fiction writings. But it's like, then it's not going to sound good. Poetry is how you make words sound good together. And if you think your writing is too sophisticated to sound beautiful, then it's gonna be lesser for it. You're missing out on something, because everybody wants to be taken so serious all the time. And but that, so lesson 1 is about words. And I don't know how you're going to do it. For me, anecdotally, I was young, I was carefree. Well, I cared a lot about this, but I didn't have a lot going on. I was kind of a loser, and maybe because all I thought about was writing, and I didn't think about real life. But that enabled me to focus so much on this thing, which is perhaps an arbitrary undertaking, but to me it was extremely important. And so I let everything else in my life fall by the wayside, and I was able to have an obsession with words and a deep and meaningful relationship with words. And that is lesson 1. I'm not going to get into the other lessons or even how lesson 1 plays into things. But the important thing about this is it's very time consuming. How long was it? I'll show you. I can show you in these books. Like, this is my first 3 novels, and these are mostly poetry. So this whole time, actually, you know, everything I ever wrote when I was beginning, I did compile it, and it's all in here. So these 3 novels is just me trying to figure out how to use the words together well, you know? So just off the top of my head, it should take this much time. How much is this? This much words is like 1/3. And then this much words is like 2/3. And then this much words, you can hear I talk ridiculous, but that's because I've been involved with Orientals for a long time, and it makes me talk kind of silly. But anyways, so all these words is, that was my lesson 1, was these 3 books. This was my relationship with words, my obsession with words. This was my lesson 1. So you can get an idea for how long this is supposed to take. So while we're building this channel, I wanted to get this lesson 1 out there because, you know, we want to build the channel and we want people to have access to what I'm trying to teach here and everything. But if the algorithm doesn't pick us up, nobody's going to see it. And if we don't get a lot of, you know, stuff happening, the algorithm's not going to pick us up. So we do have to do all these, like, you know, silly videos we're doing with the channel, but it is about these lessons. These lessons are why I created the channel. But this is lesson 1. It's extremely time consuming, so I wanted to make sure we get it out there before I kind of start goofing around and trying to build the channel in other ways. Lesson 1 is obsession with words, and so you gotta be becoming obsessed with words if you're an aspiring writer, because you don't want to skip this step, because you're getting into kind of a place where you don't really belong until you've gone through this. Or like I said, with those other people who have a formal education in English where they've done so many projects to build their understanding of the language, that this really would not apply to them. But if you're like me, who cannot put a sentence together or put a paragraph together, then this is imperative, is, you know, to have a deep and meaningful relationship and obsession with words. And that is lesson 1 of the Rose method of fiction. So thanks for checking it out, and I hope this finds fertile ground. I hope my little seed gets planted in some fertile ground out there, because I'm hoping to grow good writers into the future so that when I'm older I can read some good books. Because remember, what started this was not enough good books and reading books that are very upsetting for me because they're so lame. And I don't want to read lame books for my whole life. I want some people to go out there and write some great books. So lesson 1, Rose method of fiction, obsession with words. Deuces.